This is another episode of Bitcoin Tech Talk. As always, you can find my newsletter at jimmysong.substack.com. It goes out every Monday at 9 a.m. Central Time. And it's a amalgamation of Bitcoin stories that are interesting or technical that I gathered over the past week. All right, let's get to this week. Bitcoin's political moment has arrived. Bitcoin Tech Talk, issue number 252. The infrastructure bill has a Bitcoin clause in it, and the clause has absolutely blown up. The particulars of the clause and the various amendments themselves are significant and interesting, but that's not what I'm writing about today. What has been the more intriguing development has been the Bitcoin community's influence. The whole business of politics and legislation is really gross and disgusting, often compared to sausage making. That process usually involves a lot of lobbying and amendments and negotiation, which we've seen on Twitter the last week or so. All of this doesn't usually kick off without some significant lobbying, and boy, are we seeing that here. The single Bitcoin provision already has 3 amendments proposed to it already, including one to strike it entirely. This does not come about without some threat behind it, and what this week has shown is that Bitcoiners really do care about the issue. But then again, this has always been the case. Even back in 2011, Bitcoiners cared deeply about the regulatory environment, and many back then were trying to get clarity. What's changed now is the sheer number of people involved. 4 years ago, Bitcoin investors consisted of 2% of the investing class, and now we're at 6% and poised to grow. Some estimate that 40 million Bitcoiners are in the U.S., with higher concentrations around younger voters. For politicians looking to the future, it makes sense to pay attention to this demographic. In addition, there are many other reasons for politicians to woo this demographic. Many in Bitcoin couldn't care less about politics, so they may very well convert to single-issue voters. Bitcoiners also have a good deal of money, which is something every politician needs. Finally, Bitcoiners have low time preference, meaning that they're going to have some long memories and not let politicians get away with betrayal very easily. Politicians may score points by voting against the interests of the Bitcoin community in the short term, but they're likely to suffer long term if they oppose Bitcoin for too long. This is bad news for politicians like Elizabeth Warren, who seem to be positioning themselves squarely against Bitcoin's ability to provide savings technology to the very people they purport to represent. By the time Warren's up for re-election in 2024, will this be enough of an albatross around her neck to get her primaried in a heavily Democrat-leaning state? We shall see. Regardless, we've hit a cultural moment where Bitcoin is flexing its muscles politically. This isn't some brief encounter, but one I expect will last a long time. Yeah, this past week has been all about the infrastructure bill. It's kind of crazy that it's been sort of dragging for like a week and a half now, and it kind of shows the power of what Bitcoiners can do through lobbying. It was supposed to be voted on like last Friday or something like that, and I think Chuck Schumer really wanted to pass this bill as quickly as possible. But there's been delay after delay, largely because of this one little provision that the Treasury seems to have inserted last minute as a way to regulate this industry. But instead, what's happened is right now we're at kind of this, a lot of people seem to have called into their senators and so on. There was a lot of noise being made on Twitter about this. But that seems to have had an effect, and a lot of senators are interested. They're trying to, help their constituents, and as well they should. But it's kind of crazy how much muscle the Bitcoin community has in this regard, because we are legion. There's a lot of us, and the votes are going to matter. It's not some subsidies for ethanol or something like that, which tend to be, like issues within a particular region or something. Instead, this is going to be a big issue that's going all over the place. Let's talk about some Bitcoin. Andrew Polstra and Russell O'Connor have written up how they implemented Schnorr signatures using Simplicity. The article is informative, not just to understand that Simplicity really is a great smart contract language, but about the limitations of the current Bitcoin script. Specifically, the limitations around what's getting signed still plague the network, with any prevout being one of the ways to expand it. As they show, Simplicity allows signature modes that are way more flexible. I applaud their efforts to bring a better smart contracting language to Bitcoin, essentially written from scratch. It will be interesting to see if it's used in the way they imagine on Liquid. Yeah, so Simplicity, of course, is sort of like a moonshot almost. I don't know if or when it would come into Bitcoin. It would certainly have to be maybe like SegWit v3 or v4 at the earliest, and that's probably like, I don't know, 5-6 years out at the least. Probably closer to 10. I'm guessing. It's not going to easily get consensus. But that said, it is, the way Simplicity is designed is that you can prove the correctness of a program, because of its primitives and so on. And you can write these very interesting, essentially smart contracts using it that are provably secure and so on. And Schnorr signatures are obviously a very nice sort of thing to have, and they implemented it within this contracting language. And as Adam Back has said, you can implement lots of other things as well. That gives the developer a lot more flexibility. Whether that flexibility is desired by the rest of the users is the big question. I suspect that like most probably don't care that much about it, but then again, like, who knows? We'll have to see. Samurai Wallet has started a series on understanding privacy on the Bitcoin network. This article is a great overview of what trackability is, with concrete examples of UTXOs being used to trace the spending patterns of a particular user. Then they explain coin joins and how this defeats the tracing. Part 2 covers more advanced concepts like external transaction data, graph analysis, and wallet clustering. Overall, the articles are a good primer on some privacy issues that wallet developers and users should think about. So Samurai's been focused on privacy for quite a while, and I think it was a good thing that they put all of this down and wrote about privacy from like what's lacking in privacy within Bitcoin and how sort of chain analysis works and so on. So if you're interested in privacy and how to defeat it and so on, I think this is worth reading. CoinOS is an app for doing Bitcoin payments over Bitcoin, Lightning, and Liquid. The project looks like an interesting self-hosted way of doing payments back and forth. It's a new project, and it's meant to be sort of like personal server software that you can use to do payments back and forth, not unlike a lot of the other projects that are out there, Umbrel, Start9, why can't I think of the other one? But there's multiple other server hosted server software that you can use for this sort of thing. And the more development there is in this area, the better. And more open source projects, the better. Lightning. All right. Kevin Rook shows how the Lightning network is probably bigger than you'd think. Essentially, the argument comes down to the fact that much of what's going on in Lightning is data that's hard to collect and therefore much more private than on-chain transactions. There's probably more capacity and channel activity than we know about because much of it can be hidden from the services that collect such data. This was a good reminder that the stats that we see online about Lightning Network are only a portion of what's really going on. And this is due to sort of like the private things that you can do within Lightning. You can have a channel and like basically not tell anybody about it. And there's no real way for them to know how much in transactions you actually did over that channel. And that's a good thing. It gives you privacy, but it makes sort of like central data collection very, very difficult. And The stats that we do have are basically off of the public channels that people announce to others and so on. And those are decent thing to keep track of, but that's not the entire Lightning Network is the point of that article. Agora is a file server where you can host files and charge for file downloads. By default, the service doesn't charge anything, but you can hook it up to a Lightning node and charge sats for downloads. This is a really cool project that I think needs incorporation into the decentralized web in general. Upload bandwidth is not free, and charging for that would be very useful to defray server costs. And you can obviously imagine more interesting things like charging for downloading an MP3 file or an ebook or something like that, which people already do. It's just that the payment mechanism tends to be very clunky, right? Like you have to hook into like a PayPal API or something like that, and in order to do that, you have to have a merchant account on PayPal. In order to do that, you probably need a merchant bank account at your local bank and so on. It's way too many steps. Having something like Lightning is much easier and something that's a lot more accessible to people, at least financially. Although technically it's still kind of hard. Jameson Lopp gives advice on Lightning Network liquidity management. His advice in the article is counterintuitive but sound. Don't just connect to the big nodes that everyone else is connecting to, and instead focus on creating new bridges on the network to really earn fees. As he notes, this is a competitive market, and innovation on figuring out where to connect is bound to appear. There's probably money in there for you if you can figure out the most desired routes to create. I thought the article was interesting because it really is about building out the network. And if you just connect to the big ones, I mean, you're not going to make that much money as a router. And this is sort of like one of the weaknesses of the current implementations of Lightning. They're all sort of focused more on the consumer experience and not necessarily the router experience. And I think it's going to have to sort of split down that route. As he says he specifically mentions in the article, don't use like the default of, LNDs, like where they want you to connect, because they're just going to connect you to the biggest ones so that, you can be a consumer and you can pay people and so on, which might be great if you're just paying. But more like for people that are routing that want to earn fees, well, you want to connect the people that not other people are connecting. This is, how Southwest makes money and things like that. You want like the routes that no one's thought of, that there's a lot of demand for, and those are the places to actually create. Umbrel has released a new version of its personal server software. Not only do Umbrel servers have Bitcoin and Lightning software installed, but they're expanding their servers with photo hosting and torrenting. I would love to see a personal mail server, calendar server, and the like to reduce dependence on centralized walled gardens like Google's. The decentralized web is coming, and companies like Umbrel are making it happen. Yeah, and this is something that I've been going on for a while, is that you can either, call to a giant central walled garden like Google, or you can call into your own server. Now, that's obviously a little more difficult because you have to run that server, and a server is not free. You're going to have to maintain it and make sure it's protected and secure and all that stuff. And Umbrel is trying to help you do that. But this is how you get a decentralized web, when there's a lot of people that are willing to serve up content as well as consume content, right? Like that's how you become decentralized. If you have only a few servers, that's a centralized web. But if you have lots of servers, then it becomes more and more decentralized as more people use those servers for various things. And I like how the direction that this is going, and Lightning seems like a very natural way in which the decentralized web expands. economics, engineering, etc. SEC Chairman Gary Gensler has made a surprisingly accurate speech about Bitcoin and how the SEC will be treating it. He certainly seems to have a lot of respect for Bitcoin and has hinted that there's a lot of scamming in the altcoin space. I'm optimistic that he'll be cleaning out the cesspool of fraud that is altcoining. This should be relatively easy since altcoins are so obviously centralized. So, I mean, it sounded to me from the speech that he really wants to regulate the altcoins, and he wants to do it in a way to like absolutely crush them and say, okay, you guys are issuing securities, you need to come under our umbrella, and yeah, I mean, this is going to absolutely devastate them if it comes to pass. Now, there's a lot of other things in play. Obviously, all corners are probably going to fight this tooth and nail. But, I mean, I think it'll expose just how centralized they are. Tomer Strolight shows how Ethereum is really not different than central bank-backed fiat money. The analogies are sound, and for people that tend to lump together cryptocurrency and think that they're variations of the same thing, this article exposes Ethereum for what it is. Ethereum really has central controllers, the Cantillon winners, and the public from which it extracts value. Good to send to your confused friends. So, I mean, this, like, Ethereum bothers me to no end because they continue to be able to scam with, I don't know, now it's like the London hard fork and other stuff. And, they're continuously changing narratives so that they can scam new people. And, I mean, I got to be honest, they've been successful in doing that. But, this article sort of puts the light, okay, yeah, they're really centralized, like extremely centralized. And it's very obvious when you read the article. So, yeah, have your friends read it. In a similar vein, Alex Svetsky gives a thorough analysis of why Bitcoin and not shitcoin. This is a more thorough article with a devastating takedown of altcoins. This distinction is very important because Bitcoin is lumped together in the cryptocurrency space, usually under the banner of innovation. As Alex points out, the savings aspect and store of value is what makes Bitcoin what it is, and he emphasizes the importance of savings going forward. And this is a subtle distinction that I've seen sort of play out in the infrastructure bill as well. But when somebody is touting innovation, they're usually promoting altcoins. When somebody is promoting savings, they're usually promoting Bitcoin. And the thing is, there really isn't any innovation in the altcoin space. Whereas, the major innovation that Bitcoin allows is being able to save without like dependence on a third party, and that is crucial. And that's something that a lot of people, I don't think, really get yet. And it's not a narrative that's that popular because innovation is so much easier to sort of spout about. But savings is very important too. And I applaud this article for bringing that to the forefront. Jameson Lopp has the results from altcoin node sync tests. The results weren't good. Ethereum has bloated significantly in the past couple of years, and a full archival node requires 8 terabytes of space. Other altcoins are also clearly not engineered very well and usually have clear bottlenecks that their devs are either ignoring or are incapable of fixing. Honestly, it's surprising to me how few people seem to be able to distinguish technological garbage like the software he examined versus something well engineered like the Bitcoin Core software. And that's the thing. Like a lot of this software, especially like some of these altcoins that no one's really, or that are lower on the coin market cap tiers or whatever, I mean, the engineering there is just horrendous. And like you can clearly see it in the software when you try to run it. Unfortunately, like not a lot of people care about that. It's really just about a speculative frenzy, but this is going to end in tears. Like Ethereum is a complete horror show, and this is why they're moving to Ethereum 2.0, hoping that they can fix the problems that they created with Ethereum 1.0. I really don't think it's going to happen because the engineering stuff that they're trying to do is just insanely difficult, and it's very clear to me that they're not making the right choices. I mean, it really does sound like somebody that learned a concept last week and is trying to implement it and thinking that they're going to do it perfectly. I mean, that's how terrible it is. And Ethereum has been like that from the beginning. Anyway, like good to just look at to see just how poor the developers are on these other coins. Fluffy Pony, a longtime maintainer of Monero, has been arrested. This has to do with something he did before Monero, but it's not hard. It's hard not to suspect that there's another agenda in this, given that the amounts are a pittance to a very rich man like him. I expect a lot more prominent altcoiners to start getting in trouble, given the many sketchy things they've been doing over the past 10 years. So the thing about governments is that if they don't like you or think that you're behaving very badly, they're going to get you, even if it's not for the thing that they think you're doing something bad about. I mean, this is like, how they arrest mobsters, right? They put up racketeering charges and maybe mail fraud or something like that. Not necessarily because those are the main things that these guys did, but because those are the charges that stick. And Fluffy seems to have fallen into that hole there, and he's unfortunately in prison as a result. But I like, this is something that I've been talking about for many years. Is that a lot of these altcoiners, prison's not a distinct. It's not a like remote possibility. It's a distinct reality. I think that you're going to have to look at in the next 10 years. If you don't, then I mean, like this is how a lot of these things end. Is you're partying hard for however long, and then you get arrested, and your party's all over. I mean, it's what happened to Bernie Madoff and many others. All right, some quick hits. Bitcoiners should really consider moving to Austin. This is an article about how it's become sort of like a Bitcoin mecca, and I've certainly seen it in the many years that I've been in Austin. Way back in like 2013 or something when I started going to the meetups. It was a much smaller community than it is now. But I mean, there's a lot of people moving to Austin for that particular reason. Breedlove apologizes about BitCloud. So that was, I haven't listened to all of it, but, he basically said, I'm sorry. And, I don't know how you feel about him, but, that it's worth listening to if you're interested. Another week, another altcoin suffers an attack. This one was BSV, and they've been suffering a bunch of 51% attacks. And we always knew that this was a distinct possibility, mostly because their hash rate is just so insanely low. And the lower it goes, the worse, they can get reorged. And I think this particular reorg was like 100 blocks. It's not completely known whether or not that was used to double spend an exchange, or it's just to create chaos or something like that. But I mean, it's pretty bad. Like this is an existential risk, because if you have bigger reorgs coming down, it's going to cause the price to continue going down, and it's kind of a vicious cycle as price going down causes the hash rate to go down, which makes the attack easier, causing the price to go down, and so on. Another month, another exchange operator exit scams. So lots of exchanges do this. I like, this is why you don't keep it on on an exchange. Not your keys, not your coin. All right, some events that are coming up. I will be at the Bitcoin Standard Conference this week, August 12th to 14th in Ensenada, Mexico. BitBlock Boom in Dallas on August 26th to 29th. Token 2049 in London, England on October 8th and 9th. And in Atlanta, TabConf, November 4th and 5th. And I will be doing the Programming Blockchain Seminar in Mexico before the Bitcoin Standard Conference, August 10th and 11th. After the Token 2049 Conference in London, October 9th and 10th. And before the TabCon Conference in Atlanta on November 2nd and 3rd. And if you do want to learn Bitcoin from me as a programmer, then you can apply, and I do still have some scholarships. Let's see. My podcast this week on Bitcoin Fixes This, I talked to Jason Les, who's the CEO of Riot Blockchain, how he got to be CEO, what the mining industry is like, and how it's helping a lot of poor communities. And of course, I read through last week's newsletter as well. I was on Tone Show to talk about Fluffy's arrest, the F Politburo's latest, and much more. I talked about the new book with Blue Collar Money and Biblical Wealth podcast, and both are very Christian. So if you're a Christian and are interested in my argument for Bitcoin from a Christian perspective, you can listen to those. My other books are the Little Bitcoin book and Programming Bitcoin, both of which are available on Amazon. Unchained Capital is a sponsor of this newsletter. I'm an advisor, and I'm very proud to be a part of a company that's enhancing security for Bitcoin holders. If you need multi-sig, collaborative custody, or Bitcoin native financial services, learn more at unchained.com. Fiat Delenda Est, this song is done.